Hello, and welcome to this introductory tutorial on Omniverse Blast. Blast is an amazing tool capable of helping with destruction in your scene. It offers useful tools for fracturing assets while generating bonds to keep the pieces together until an impact occurs. It's pretty cool, and I can't wait to show you how it works. Let's get started. Before we begin, it is important we are sure our extension is loaded and ready to use. To do this, let's go ahead and go Windows, Extensions. Then let's search for Blast and check that the toggle is green. If it is not enabled, select the toggle to enable it and close the extensions window. Once complete, we are ready to start breaking things with Blast. Okay, so starting with a new scene in Omniverse Create, the first thing we will need to do is give our scene some physics. To do this, we need to add a physics scene by going Create, Physics, Physics Scene. Once done, you should notice in the stage that we now have a physics scene element. The defaults are generally good, but should you wish to adjust the general physics of the scene, you can select and adjust here. One specific one we may wish to enable is CCD. This will help us if we have very fast-moving objects. In large scenes with lots of interactions, you may wish to leave this off, however. Okay, so we now have physics in our scene. Next up, we need a floor to keep our objects from falling infinitely due to gravity. To do this, let's go Create, Physics, Ground Plane. Great, we now have a floor, and it's already pre-programmed with physics interactions. I think I will slap a material on this and give it some color just to make things less gray. In order to add some ambiance to the scene, let's also add a bit of decent lighting. Simply select Create, Light, Dome Light, and then in the Properties panel under Texture File, select and navigate to Localhost, NVIDIA, Assets, Skies, Cloudy, and select whichever sky you please. Once selected, adjust the intensity, and voila! Our simple demo now has some decent lighting. Excellent. Okay, now we need a destructible asset, and for this, we need a mesh. So, let's navigate in our content browser to our localhost server and navigate to the NVIDIA mount. Then find Samples, Marbles, Assets, Standalone. Now, let's find the SM glass jar opened file and drag it into our scene. Excellent. Once dragged to our scene and selected, let's hit the F key to focus our viewpoint on the glass bottle. Wonderful, what a nice asset. Let's smash it to pieces, shall we? Okay, so the first thing we will need is to locate the static mesh of our glass bottle in the stage. Use the plus sign to expand the asset and select the SM glass jar open mesh. With the asset selected, right-click and select Physics, Apply Preset, and Rigid Body. This will allow our object to fall and interact with general physics. Let's go ahead and test this. First, select the top of the hierarchy of the glass jar. In the Properties panel, scroll down to Kinds and select Component. Now we can select more easily. In Prim Mode, we will select our mesh, while in Model Mode, we will select the top of our hierarchy. Now, using Model Mode, let's lift our glass jar up a bit and press play. You should now see that the jar drops to the floor. Awesome. Now, let's dig into Blast. In the bottom of our interface, there should be a tab named Blast. Let's go ahead and select it. Next, switch to Prim Mode and select our jar mesh. Okay, good. Now this is the point where you need to think about how you want to break your asset. In this case, I'm going to begin with only a few Voronoi sites, 5 to be exact. Each of these sites will be a fragment. Granting base level control of the fracture is done by contact threshold. Lower numbers here will allow a contact to be reported with less force than a higher number. For this simulation, I'm going to select 1000, so little nudges do not report contact, but a decent hit will. Alright, now let's scroll down to the Fracture Selected button and select it. Your glass jar is now shattered. We can review the individual sites created by simply setting the Explode view to 1. This will separate the Voronoi sites just enough to let us work, but shows the individual fragments nicely. Boy, that's already looking pretty nice. Now, because I plan to drop this jar, I will assume that the bottom of my jar will shatter into many more fragments than the top. So again, using Prim Mode, I will select one of the lower fragments. For this fracture, let's increase our sights a bit to 10, and then press Fracture Selected. Cool. We now have a more interesting distribution of fragments. Now, let's repeat that process along the bottom, so when it hits, we get some good small chunks and bits and pieces. Excellent. I think that should do it. Let's give it a test by pressing play. Cool. We are getting the results we expected. Large, well-defined fragments on the top, small shattered bits on the bottom. As you may be able to see, this allows us to be very exact with our shattering and allows us to define breaks in both a planned and a natural way. It's pretty awesome. Sweet, so our jar is ready to smash. Now, go forth and experiment. Grab other additional assets and fracture them too. Assemble a small scene and let things crash into each other. Have some fun, and be sure to check the documentation for additional features Blast offers for advanced simulations. Before I leave you to tinker, I'd like to mention that if you wish to reset a fracture, it's best to use the Reset Blast Data button. To do this, switch to Prim Selection Mode, select the mesh, and press Reset Blast Data. This will clear all blast content from the asset, allowing you to start the fracturing process over again. Okay, I'd say that's pretty good and concludes our first steps into the Blast extension. Hopefully you found this informative, and I look forward to seeing you again in future tutorials.